Thank you all for joining us over lunch. I mean, hopefully you're all munching away on your lunch whilst you listen to me, and hopefully the talk of, and I will get on to talking about sewage, and hopefully that doesn't put you off your lunch too much. Emily, appreciate the introduction there. So in terms of what I'm going to try and cover today, and I should probably start my stopwatch so that I try and keep the time. I'm going to tell you who I am, although I think Emily's done a fairly good job at doing that already. What Anglian Water do, some of the challenges facing the water sector at the present time, what integrated water management is, in case people aren't aware, briefly touch on some of the current projects we're working on, and then maybe do go into a little bit more detail on a large project that we're working on in partnership with others around enabling water smart communities. And then we'll bring it to a close, and hopefully there will still be time for some questions. Okay, I've just seen there's quite a few people on this call. It's fairly daunting, but we'll carry on. So just go through my career journey really, and apologies if this seems like a little bit self-indulgent, but just so you understand where I'm coming from on this. So I graduated with an environmental engineering degree and went into consultancy originally, so delivering work ranging from sort of individual site-based flood risk assessments through to kind of water space master plans for the London Olympics, actually. Then moved over to Australia, working for AECOM out there, where I really fell in love with water sensitive urban design, and which I guess you could probably rename as SUDS over here. Not quite the same, probably more of an integrated water management approach, actually, and delivered a lot of integrated water management strategies out there. Returned back to a point where we were all getting excited about setting up SUDS approvals bodies, ready and waiting for Schedule 3 to be enacted. And so set up, I started leading the Lead Local Flooding Authority at Hammersmith and Fulham. So that Schedule 3 never quite came into action. So although very hopeful that it does in the near future, and it is looking promising to do so. But yeah, led the Lead Local Flooding Authority there, and got involved in a lot of SUDS retrofit. It's a very urban council, and so there's lots of surface water flooding, and we delivered a lot of SUDS in order to capitalise on that. I then joined the Greater London Authority, which for those who are not operating across London, that is a sort of overseeing body across all 33 local authorities across London. Headed up by Sadiq Khan as mayor, and led on surface water management there. And then before, which took about 2 years ago, pretty much coinciding, within a few weeks, I left just before the big floods in July, in London, which was, I'd like to think was not intentional, but yeah, joined Anglian Water back in the area I grew up in to lead on integrated water management, and here we are today. So hopefully that gives you some sort of idea of kind of my background to this, and hopefully I haven't seen too many people log off at that point realizing that I know nothing about this, but hopefully you're still with me. So Anglian Water. So we are the biggest water and water recycling company by geographic area of the 11 in England and Wales. We serve almost 7 million people across the east of England. We encompass about 20% of England, actually, and over 1,200 kilometres of coastline. We've got a number of rivers, in fact, 3,300 kilometres worth of rivers, and the UK's only wetland national park in the Norfolk Broads. Hopefully you can see where we're located. It's exceptionally flat, which leads to some issues, but also from a surface water flooding perspective, potentially benefits. But yeah, it's exceptionally dry, but I'll get on to that in a second. I'm mindful of the fact that people, the members of SIWEM and those attending may not necessarily be in the water sector, may feel as though they know a little bit about it, but and you'd be amazed at how many people don't necessarily know about the infrastructure that goes on. So to give you some sort of feel for it, we abstract about 50% of the water for our region from the ground, and the rest of it comes from river abstraction and reservoir abstraction, so surface water, essentially. We take that to a treatment works where we treat it to a world-class standard, and then deliver it to properties via a pressurized system. So that's both household properties and commercial properties. We then take the waste from that, and unfortunately, on the nature of it being a very flat region, it is often pumped back to a water recycling centre, where we then treat that to a quality good enough to be able to discharge to the environment. I put in there also our purpose, which is really key to us at Anglian Water. And I appreciate this may well sound like me sort of towing the party line and kind of preaching, but genuinely, this is involved in everything that we do. And you can see it down there. And we actually changed our articles of association a number of years back to incorporate purpose. So effectively, we are beholden to the environment and the community before profit making. Despite what you may well read in the press of late. So, and I think that's really key to bear in mind, and I think it's really instrumental if we're trying to deliver integrated water management. So some of the challenges facing us, and these are by no means all, but they, although we're only a region of England, we do face some truly global challenges, and they're materialising fast. So we face increased risk of flooding, the impacts from sea level rise, with a large part of the region being below sea level. We're also the driest region, though, in England, with only 2/3 of the area, the average rainfall, and climate change adds uncertainty to that and drought risk. And our region is fastest growing outside of the southeast. We already serve about 7 million customers, and have three of the 5 fastest growing cities, and population is expected to increase by about 1 million over the next 25 years. So it's quite a considerable increase in demand likely to happen there. Yeah, and whilst all those pressures on demand will rise, the amount of water will remain the same, will actually potentially decrease. And so it's a real trick to try and manage that. So I mentioned that we abstract a large amount from the ground. Now, many of those licenses are time limited, which essentially means that when it comes around to expiring, we've got to apply again for them. And although we committed, and took the notification that they were delivering it for, historic maximum rates within our previous water resource management plan, the rules of the game changed somewhat during this asset management period, which meant actually there is quite considerably less water available when we come to renew our licenses. This has led to a lot less water, and some really interesting, or I say interesting, probably in inverted commas, discussions around how best to distribute this. Now, there has been a recent, it's probably worth noting, a judicial review that occurred last year around Norfolk Broads, which may lead to actually further restrictions. These license restrictions are not just impacting us, they're actually impacting a lot of the land users and those that have private boreholes across the region, which, if you can imagine, when people get the water that they previously abstracted from the ground, when that license is reduced or potentially removed entirely, the first port of call is to turn to the water company for that, and we're already struggling to meet the existing demands. So there's been some quite difficult discussion and decisions being made around that, and we're certainly on the non-household side, that is an area of significant interest right now as to what we do related to that. But essentially, we've got an issue in terms of water resources, and not only that, in terms of water stress, but 92% of the rivers are actually falling sadly short of good ecological status. Meaning that we really do need to keep more in the environment. So, without trying to sound too doom and gloom, unfortunately, it is a little bit doom and gloom here, and we really do need to start, taking action. Otherwise we are going to find ourselves constraining agricultural production, and as we are described, I think, by many as the breadbasket of the UK, no less, that's going to have a significant impact upon the food supply within the UK. There's also potential, as I mentioned, we've got large growing cities and large economic centres, and that can have an impact there. And by no means last on this, the iconic chalk rivers, streams and peatlands and wetlands that we encounter, we need to ensure that they are maintained, if not improved. So that really sounds quite dark, doesn't it? Apologies for that, but that's the world in which we're operating right now. Quite rightly, we're being asked to encourage a reduction in per capita consumption. There you go. As the first one that I left an acronym in there. So PCC being per capita consumption, basically how much people use per day. On average, our region is around 143 litres per person per day, and we are looking to try and bring that down, and we've been asked to bring that down quite considerably to 110 by 2050. We've also been asked to reduce quite significantly on the non-household side, which, as you can imagine, with those abstraction licenses being removed, they're turning to mains water for that. So they're additional demands. So that's quite a hard target to meet. And then you've got leakage reduction. We were already leading the way on leakage. But so if you've already taken a lot of steps and invested heavily in trying to address leakage, to then see a further quite considerable reduction in that is tough. The low-hanging fruit is gone, so to speak. But that's where we're aiming at, and we're designing our business plan to meet those reduction targets set within the Environment Act. So some of you will recall Sir James Bevan, the previous chief exec of the Environment Agency, using the term the jaws of death. Well, I would consider that we probably have our own jaws of death right here, right now. You hopefully can see there the kind of the water available for use and how it's gradually decreasing, whilst actually the demand is quite considerably increasing with population growth and the likes. And we are fast approaching a position where actually we're unable to meet that. We would ideally like to keep that headroom to be able to move things around and ensure that actually, whilst for those peak times that we can meet there, but that we're almost at a point where we've got to a point where we can't meet that. So yeah, it's a pretty dark situation. But there are large infrastructure projects that have been in the planning stages for quite a while. So our strategic pipeline, which is taking water from North Lincolnshire down to the southeastern parts of our region, so that should be complete by the end within the next couple of years, but it has been a long time in the making, and that helps to address some of those water resource issues. And then you may be familiar with the fact that we recently put in applications for 2 new reservoirs proposed, which sadly they do take a long time and I mean we may well see them online by 2040, all going well. So there have to be, we have to look quite a long way into the future for this. Nutrient neutrality has hit our shores in that respect. So in Norfolk in particular, under the habitats regulations, Natural England has issued advice for basically sites with, as I indicated, that North Broads are unfavourable condition due to excess nutrient pollution. And so plans can only go ahead for growth where it doesn't increase nutrient loadings into that. So essentially those new development needs to prove it's nutrient neutral, which as a water company, we play a valuable key role in trying to address. We don't own the issue in that respect, but actually we hold as a number of the cards to try and help to unlock this, and are working really closely with those local planning authorities to try and ensure that we can help to unlock the growth that those local planning authorities want to see going forward and the country needs. So it's a tricky one over there, and especially when a lot of the pressure or concentration has been placed on the discharges coming out of sewage treatment works. Obviously, we don't create the sewage in the first place. We deal with what's coming in, but there's additional treatment that may be necessary in order to ensure that new growth can occur. And then the elephant in the room, I think you'd be hard pressed not to have seen or read anything about combined sewer overflows. We just got to be honest here. Storm overflows and sewage treatment works should not damage our environment. CSOs were designed in the past for a fairly good reason, but they are not a 21st century answer to the problem of internal sewer flooding. So we shouldn't need them on our network ultimately. We've already removed many of the highest risk CSOs on our network and continue to assess and remove those that pose a threat. There is an awful lot more that we can do, and we're honest with that, and that's a real opportunity though, and we need to find a way to do that, and to find a better way to reduce the risk of sewer flooding from now and into the future. That includes looking at blockages, trying to remove that automatic right to connect, part of the Schedule 3 element, and generally managing water where it falls. And I think integrated water management plays a really key part in that, trying to harness that water rather than seeing it as a waste or a risk product. We're investing really heavily into this with a campaign alongside Severn Trent Water and Get River Positive, and there's a number of commitments there, which, and I'm sure my colleague could probably put a link in the chat, or you can find it there on the slide to see what things we're doing along those lines. I probably won't dwell too long on that because I think we could probably spend the whole hour talking on this. So I'll move on if that's all right. To speak about what I guess I've been invited here today to speak on. I mean, I've touched on some of those challenges facing the water sector. It's important you recognise that they are increasingly linked to housing growth. Across England and Wales, we're seeing more frequent and severe flood events, sustained droughts, and increased impacts on water quality. And I think it's really key that we see integrated water management as part of the solution here. It's not a silver bullet by any stretch, but actually, it's not a solution per se. It's a way of thinking. So integrated water management, or IWM, I think I'll probably continue rather than saying it fully throughout. It offers a potential way forward to unlock opportunities across water and housing and delivers wider outcomes for people and the communities in which they. Right, so IWM is internationally established approach that addresses the water cycle as a whole, deploying a combination of innovative infrastructure solutions and non-physical interventions to support new development. Despite the fact that international evidence of its potential, IWM is yet to be fully embraced, I would suggest, in England and Wales. This has less to do with technical solutions, most of which exist and are fairly well proven, more to do with the complex non-structural challenges like funding, ownership, shared value, and whole life stewardship of assets. And I'm going to probably unpick that a little bit more when I get onto our enabling water smart communities. But effectively, take yourself back to when at school and looking at the water cycle. It's looking at the full water cycle and not just looking at a particular element through a single lens, because ultimately it is all the same water, and it's how we can maximize the efficiency on that. You can look at integrated water management on a household basis, simply capturing that rainfall that lands on your roof and utilising it for non-potable uses. You can look at it from a development perspective, so capturing rainfall that lands across all hard surfaces and maybe even delivering that back into the properties for toilet flushing or the likes. And you can look at it from a regional perspective, and some great work the Environment Agency and others have been doing around the Oxcam arc. Sorry, I shouldn't use that term anymore, but around the integrated water management framework, they're looking at a large scale, and there's some interesting work going on in London at the present time around that, which, it just takes it, looking at a full catchment basis. It's actually where it really comes to its fore, but I think we also need to be thinking about it all the way down to a household level, because it all plays a part. I'm just going to have a sip of water if I may. I kind of think of it as almost aligning the different hierarchies, and what a greater time to speak about hierarchy than a few days after the coronation. But so if we, hopefully people are familiar with water neutrality hierarchy, but this is essentially reduce, reuse, and offset then the rest of what's left. If you look at the drainage hierarchy that's present in London Plan and NPPF and the likes, actually top of the list is around reusing it, and I think that's really key to bring out that actually you're linking in water resources and the wastewater side and seeing the potential opportunities there, and then you bring the environment element into it, and then it really starts to play a tune. So if we concentrate first on that reducing element, some of the projects that I'm involved in at the minute. Around the fact that we have some really forward-thinking local planning authorities in our area, and we've managed to get to a point where a majority of them have a policy that mirrors the water stressed element within the NPPF, that says, that new development should be designed for 110 litres or less. Now, unfortunately, building control and planning authorities do not monitor this per se, to make sure that actually they're being built to that. And some recent work that's been carried out by WRC and Welsh Water has found that actually, on average, they're using over 140 litres, despite the policies that are in place. Now, if we can't actually, new build is only a small percentage of the existing building stock, or rather of building stock. If we're not putting the new stuff in correctly, then we're actually just setting ourselves up, to have a greater problem going forward. So we want to do some work around actually working with developers and making sure that actually we are meeting that 110. I don't think that anyone's doing it on purpose. I genuinely don't. I think it's just a lack of information that's available. And I think the water label will make a huge impact on that. That's due to come in the coming years. But it's actually understanding that procurement process and ensuring that we're using the right way of calculating that. So some work that we're going to be doing on that, following on from the Welsh Water study. We're also gathering together evidence to help local planning authorities and set policies that may go beyond the 110. The EIP that came out earlier this year suggested it's moving towards more of a sort of 100 litres person per day for a region like ours. And we need to make sure that everyone understands what that means, both from a, physically what how do you achieve that within a development, but also from a cost perspective, what the additional burden might be on development. So we're working very closely with the Environment Agency, Natural England, Cambridge Water, and the local LPAs across Cambridgeshire, particularly focusing on that area at the present time, to develop up that joint protocol and approach with an evidence base that might help them formulate that policy. And that will be publicly available in the near future. So, okay. So I suppose in terms of reuse, I kind of break it down into looking at three key areas here. So from a source perspective, we're looking at taking it from rainwater in the first place. So whether that be rainwater, which would just be collected off a roof, or stormwater, which is also including hard surfaces. Grey water, which is basically the wastewater that comes out from showers and basins, basically anything that hasn't got any sort of fecal matter aspect to it. And then the wonderful black water recycling. Hope everyone has finished their lunch now, as I start talking about black water recycling in a little bit more detail. So those are sort of three key areas of sources I would suggest. Then I kind of look at, okay, on the scale of collection and distribution for reuse. So, you're looking at whether it's purely looking at collecting it on plot and distributing on plot, or collecting it, on the wider development scale. So that might be, there's an image there of Clay Farm just outside Cambridge, or on the outskirts of Cambridge there, where it's surface water and rainwater collected, centralised area, a little bit of additional treatment, and then distributed back into the buildings for WC flushing. So I think that would be more on a development scale, and then actually there's opportunities to look on a community or regional basis. And certainly from my time in Australia, that you would come across additional pipe work which was treated sewage effluent, which delivered a non-potable water supply for irrigation and the likes. And that's something that we really haven't got down, there's not too many examples of in the UK, but I think it's going to fast become one going forward, where you're supplying a slightly different quality, a lesser quality of water, not necessarily treating everything to drinking water standard, because not everything needs that quality. And then it looks at the sort of how we're actually using it. So whether that be for external use, internal use, or commercial use. And obviously they differ in terms of their demands, the scale of demands, but also the type, how you get it to the distribution in that form. I'm going to now touch on a few key areas that I think are worth exploring, and with projects that kind of we're working on as well. So I think this is the low-hanging fruit, if truth be told. Now, flood risk policy has been in place for quite some time, encouraging people to reduce down the amount of surface water, or the rate of surface water leaving site. And some developments and so have led to great nature-based solutions, and SUDs that are really providing that wider benefit. They incorporate attenuation, but maybe distributes across the site. That's fantastic. I would say that's not all. And quite often you end up with some form of attenuation, whether that be a large crater at the end of the site or an underground tank. Now, those tanks and attenuation do very little in terms of water resources. They effectively are designed to be able to drain down within a set period of time, so they're available for the next storm event. Now, I can't help, certainly when working in London, when we had all these tanks around the place that were effectively dump tanks that just don't drain back to the sewer, after the rainfall had stopped. Well, and then you turn around and you go, we've got a water resources issue. But this is storage, this is attenuated water distributed across the catchment. We should be maximising that. Now, up until, well, it's been a number of years actually these have been in place, but technology has advanced to such a degree that actually these can be converted to smart tanks, so you can actually provide that flood risk benefit as well as a water resources potential, and that's through, basically it speaks to weather forecasting data that says this much rain is arriving, please make sure there's that amount of room available in that tank to take the water. And there's various products on the market, and I appreciate I've not necessarily hit all of them in those, but you can see a number of them there. And I think this has got to be our way forward, both in terms of new build, but also retrofitting it. We are seeing real issues when it comes to water resources. We've got to make sure that we're maximising the use of that water. So I would urge people to look at this, certainly for any projects that you're working on going forward. For those film buffs here, you'll see, well, I'll leave it with you. Hopefully you recognise the photo there. We're working with a number of prisons at the minute. So something that's worth noting about prisons is that they don't have separate systems. We've seen Shawshank Redemption, which is, there's Andy McVeigh, crawling through the sewer to exit prison. We don't build big pipes coming out of prisons for good reasons, and that would be a good reason. And so it all goes into combined sewer. Now, the problem is that often these lead to issues downstream because there's quite significant roof areas that are draining to these sewers. And so in order to help address the risk of combined sewer overflows downstream and flood risk encountered down there, we're actually trying to capture that water for utilisation within the prison network. So in one particular scenario, we're actually looking to use it for irrigation within polytunnels that we created there, and a new tree nursery. And the part of the whole project is around developing the skills with the inmates to help develop skills for future employment post time spent within that facility. We know there's a skills shortage going forward, and actually what a great way to get them involved in it and learn those skills whilst in that position. Now, that fresh produce is actually, any excess fresh produce that's not used, prison is donated then to the local food bank. So it's a lovely little circular economy from my perspective, and a really interesting project. It's linked into the Reclaim the Rain project, which is a DEFRA Environment Agency innovation funded project. Well worth checking out, actually, a project run by Essex and Suffolk County Councils there. All right, final effluent reuse. This is we've got to change the name of this. It sounds disgusting, doesn't it? But final effluent is ostensibly the discharge that comes out of our water recycling centres, as we refer to them, or sewage treatment works, as people may commonly know them as. So we've got over 1,100 of them across our region, which is quite a considerable number. And I mentioned to you before that our region's flat, which is probably why we have quite so many. Now, these are discharged into the environment, and a lot of the time the water body requires that water, but not all the time. And with the way that growth is going and the additional flows that are likely to come through, actually it may be that they don't want the additional water. Or could we actually start looking at this for non-potable water usage? So I pulled together the bones of a project, and I'm just looking at seeking funding at the minute, which is not easy to find, but around trying to create that national methodology for determining whether final effluent is available. 100% appreciate that. So in certain instances, that receiving water body needs the flows, but we're not necessarily looking at capturing all those flows. But for instance, in those coastal regions where it literally goes out to the North Sea, could we look to actually maintain those and keep them inland for use to replace existing water demands? So I'm looking at localized non-potable uses. So looking to try and develop up that national methodology and then apply that across so that we have greater clarity over where it's not available. And that gives both us the ability to be proactive, but the number of people that are approaching us in a minute about supplies that of vinyl effluent is quite astronomical, and particularly around the golfing sector. And yeah, I'd really like to see us get to a point within the next few years where actually we're seeing golf courses irrigated with this water. It's potentially nutrient rich as well, which helps to address some of those nutrient balances within the catchments. So well, I would like to see it going forward, and I appreciate for those that have been speaking to me on a regular basis over the last couple of years, you'll have heard me just banging this drum. Hopefully, eventually, we'll find ourselves in a position where we can get to this point. Right, I've got a little bit. I've probably run a little bit over time, so let me try and rush through this a little bit. This is a project that's been dominating quite a large part of my life for the last couple of years. So in July last year, this project was awarded funding through the Ofwat Water Breakthrough Challenge Fund Transform Stream, which aims to, so that stream is all about sparking ambitious innovation and enable new approaches and ways of working, equipping the water sector to address big challenges facing the sector, driving far-reaching and long-lasting benefits to customers, society and the environment across England and Wales now and into the future. So I've mentioned the challenges facing us. This project will explore all of these challenges to identify barriers, enablers and opportunities to accelerate the uptake of integrated water management throughout the new housing delivery. And it is focused on new build residential. Now, enabling water smart communities is a complex cross-sector multi-stakeholder project. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Framing factors limiting innovative delivery of integrated water management within new development. It requires exploration of social, environmental, economic and technological contexts. So I believe for this, we really need a multi-stakeholder approach, which is why we've pulled together a number of different partners to deliver this transformational project. So you'll see in there a number of water companies, some key organisations, including CIWEM, in there, and some key academic research. Those that are really at the cutting edge around consumer behaviour in water, and some international. So in KWR, the Dutch Research Establishment for Water, in there, along with others. We've also got an independent programme board, which effectively we call upon every quarter to make sure that we're not missing a trick, and to alert us to any great opportunities that might be arising, and to champion the project to some degree. And they're really key in helping deliver this project. Right, so what is this all about? And apologies if it all starts to sound a bit complicated. Hopefully it's not too. So we're taking a design-led approach. And we're looking, it's underpinned by 4 interdependent research themes. These themes will inform the initial discovery and problem definition phase, and will underpin the subsequent design, testing, and delivery of both the transition framework and our demonstrators. So I will try to go through these and unpack this a little bit. So rethinking value. So across water and housing, there will be a wide range of perspectives, capacities, priorities and methodologies around value that inform how individuals, communities and organisations act. By researching visions, values and motivations across different actors, the project will explore areas of common ground and identify actions to enable place-based investment and shared value creation. Basically, what do people care about across the different organisations? And it's rethinking assets, and those assets effectively, that's the stuff. So the term asset means different things to different people ultimately. By exploring and stretching conventional asset definitions, this project will build a new shared understanding of water cycle and housing assets from catchment to community and household scale. We'll look beyond physical infrastructure to include non-physical assets that are essential to effective system design and delivery of stewardship. Rethinking roles. Wow. This isn't just looking at developers. This isn't just looking at the water sector. Actually, this is looking across the whole piece. And if truth be told, housing and water have historically been delivered by separate agencies and ring-fence roles and budgets, and often in different objectives and timescales. This fragmented approach ultimately, has led to the issues that we're facing. And we think the roles of existing and potential actors is key to unlocking new stewardship models. And then rethinking evidence. So the project will review different types of data, insight, and evidence by various actors to accelerate shared action and investment in water smart communities through a combination of practice-based research and design, user testing, and then pilots and live demonstrators. The project will demonstrate, or hopefully demonstrate and contribute new evidence focused to maximising impact-informed academic research and monitoring and evaluation. So we're kind of trying to base it around those 4 key areas, and hopefully that starts to make sense. And then just to add more complexity to it, we're breaking that down to 4 different development models. I think whenever I previously thought about development, I kind of straight away focused in on private sector-led development, and yet actually there's other ways in which housing development is delivered, which I think has slightly different drivers. And I suppose it's important that we look at those. So if I was to take it really simply, private typically looks for a shorter term return on investment, more dependent on current market and finance conditions. Whereas maybe public sector-led development is typically led by local authority or housing associations or other non-profit management organisations able to take a longer term interest in the role in delivery, management, and a return on investment. Community-led, which is really growing in terms of method of delivering housing at the minute. It's typically self-initiated housing groups, co-creating, co-investing, and actually co-designing new housing with future community involved from the outset. And that's a really interesting area, which probably lends itself best to this. But we know that obviously isn't necessarily the norm across it. But what can we take from that potentially can feed back in? And then water sector-led. Basically, it will look at exploring the role of the water company as an anchor institution within a long-term commitment to place. What role can the water sector play in this? Right, due to I guess the complex nature of the challenge, a range of stakeholders and innovative nature of solutions, the project is following a design-led approach. So during the first year, we've built it down to the discovery phase, ostensibly, where we look to define the problem, identify the barriers, enablers, and the proposed framework for action and transformation. And that will be underpinned by our key research themes, as I mentioned before. And so we're coming towards the end of that first year, and so during the end of 2023, we'll move into an iterative process of design and delivery informed by that user testing and in-depth academic research and piloting demonstrate solutions across a range of different housing delivery and asset ownership models. And just to sort of nip back, you'll see that we've kind of divvied it up across the 4 main water companies as to where we're going to look into deliver this, to hopefully give it a bit of a different geographic context. But yeah, you'll see that we'll be looking to deliver demonstrators on the basis of that in those different areas. Right, so I won't delve into this too much, but this is we're looking at outputs delivered in July around these key areas and in discovery, and then we will define that down going forward and look to demonstrate it. So you can kind of see the key outputs that are likely to be delivered there. They're the titles there under possibilities, change and context. And I would urge you to watch this space in that respect. There's a danger here that I'm going to go a bit too into the detail, so I'll probably skim over a few of these in the essence of time, in interest of time. So just saying that there's challenges which at present time are looked at on a systemic basis, and they actually start to become cascading. So the impact of climate change can actually have a greater impact, encouraging more people towards urban centres, which then has a greater impact on the urban infrastructure and the like. So ultimately, we need to get to a point where we understand the different challenges that the housing sector faces and the water sector faces, and look at opportunities to kind of bring those together to unlock potential opportunities, benefits, multiple benefits, I suppose. And that's what we're looking at at the present time around that framework, around the discovery phase, identifying those key barriers that they're currently seeing, the issues that they're facing, and potentially looking at the opportunities to work together to release it. So, the delivery of blue and green infrastructure, for instance, would be key as part of that. I probably won't dwell on this too long, but I've been using the term water space smart community, and I think it means a lot of different things to different people. And we've been populating this around. We've had lots of feedback into this, and we've come up with this working definition at the present time. Hopefully that rings true with what you're expecting it to see. But ostensibly, it's not just a development. It's about bringing together that group of actors, or people or organisations for that matter, to come together to initiate, deliver, and care for a place that uses water in an appropriate manner. And then, sorry, this probably is far too much detail actually, but where we came up with the name and why enabling is so key. As far as we're concerned, when we start looking at this framework, there's kind of these 3 essential building blocks to it. So that's around value, around whole life stewardship, and then around shared assets. And those are the 3 key areas that we think we need to be addressed in order to actually deliver a water smart community. And I've got some further, these slides will be shared afterwards and you can look at them in a bit more detail. But when you go into the issues around value, I mean, ultimately these are around the drivers and outcomes sort, and I sort of briefly touched on that earlier, and making that case to identify where that shared value space might be. And then around stewardship, actually identifying those key and then looking at how we can empower that, whether that be through regulation and policies. So ensuring that people then, understand that they're the accountability element and they're locked in over time. I think someone referred to it as like a non-return valve. When everything really, and absolutely everything, hits us, and we're out down on these, what are the key areas that we're not going to disappear from? So how can we ensure that we're really going to be delivering this going forward and we have long-term stewardship? And then around assets. So I think typically we've looked at that kind of second level, like water sensitive development. How do we deliver that? I think what we're trying to get across here is actually it's not just influenced by what's on the site, but actually what's external to it. So, you deliver stuff for on-site, but actually what does that deliver? The benefits that are derived from the interventions on site actually can help the wider community, but also interventions in the wider community can help the development and how it fits in, I guess, with a greater ecosystem there. Just as I draw to a close, we're very aware this is a project that's only funded till the end of 2025, and we'll only be able to achieve a certain amount. But the idea is that we're trying to set ourselves up so that actually it doesn't just stop dead, and in 2026 it's all forgotten about. Actually, how do we drive that impact going forward and that transition? It's something that we're already thinking about and spending a long time looking at. So yeah, you'll see. We are, although those deliverables will be coming out in July, they're very much the first outputs. We're looking to try and deliver those demonstrators going forward, so you can actually see them, the physical and pilot some of these techniques, and then really how do we bring that forward, going forward, especially given our asset management periods. How do we influence our business model planning for following AMPs and the likes. I think that's probably enough on that from me. I'd like to sort of draw your attention to is the website, and we have a profile on LinkedIn. Follow that. We constantly are posting stuff that's relevant to this, and please do give us a follow in that respect. Take a look, and I'd draw your attention to, we have very kindly been given a slot at Flooding Coast around obstacles and opportunities, which you'd be more than welcome to join us. Have a look at Flooding Coast, sign up. It's on the 3rd day. I think that's me. Has the participant list gone down as I've gradually been speaking.
We've still got plenty of people that are super
Okay.
excited about the Q&A.
Super excited.
We've
Okay.
only got 10 minutes left, or 9 minutes left now. So I'm going to.
All right, sorry. Should I stop sharing?
Fire questions. Yeah, go for it. So do some quick fire questions. So we've had quite a few questions in the chat. So we'll just try and get to as many as we can. So there's a question around semi-engineered solutions with just a few landowners. Are multi-site, multi-owner, nature-based solutions properly included in the long and medium list options, i.e. modelled, and attention paid to the fact that certainly at a catchment level, it means it's much easier to exclude at the shortlist option, I think, for kind of smaller scale projects.
So I'm assuming that's talking about generally our business rather than enabling more smart communities, because I think it's fair to say that an enabling more smart community, it probably isn't to that degree. But from a sort of generally Anglian water, that's our desire. Don't get me wrong, it's really difficult. And I think, Emily, given your experience, just the partnership working element and making sure that everyone's aligned and everyone's, that all the timings are aligned is really key. I think it's if it's all right with the person who's posed that question, I don't know if they're able to declare or provide their email address. Maybe I can come back with a bit more of a detailed response on that one, because it's a mouthful and I didn't manage to write it all down in order to be able to answer it. But B, I think there's probably some complexities around what we're able to respond to and exactly that. Sorry, that's okay. I sound like a politician now, don't I?
No, it's fine. So we've got another question here. So you mentioned rethinking roles. How can something like the government's anticipated land use framework support our water challenges in the best way?
God, these aren't easy, are they? Wow. So I think it can. It'd be the first answer to that. How can it support? Well, I think ultimately, the more we look at it, water in a more holistic fashion, then it's going to be a benefit. So completely changing kind of elms and the lights, I think that's going to be beneficial potentially. But actually, what it means is that more people have a role to play in how we manage water. And I think the more we engage with those personnel and look at the opportunities, and it's unfortunately there isn't a silver bullet. There's not a one size fits all solution here. It is very much bespoke to those areas. But the more we can speak to each other and the more we can potentially align our programs and investments, I think the better. And so therefore I think there's a great opportunity there, if that's the really simple answer.
Perfect, thank you. So how do we create incentive for majority landowners to give up land for integrated water management solutions? And a follow-up question, how can we do this with social sustainability for locals?
That's an interesting one. I think the wording's an interesting one. Give up land. I personally don't think there's any land that needs to be given up per se. I think one of the things that's where I'd really like to stress is that actually we're not looking to try, I think previously people referred to SUDs as there's an area of land SUDs. Well, actually, shouldn't it just be incorporated within the development? So there is nothing reason why there's a sort of a separate bit for integrated water management. It should be incorporated as part of the landscape. You might want to actually, I appreciate that if you're looking at large tanks, there are treatment facilities that you may have to give up effectively what was previously allocated as a bin store, for instance, in development. So that's the only sort of giving up scale we're talking about. But actually the key there is around integrating it within the design rather than trying to cookie cut it, or rather try to retrofit it into your design afterwards. Apologies, you might have to repeat the second part of that question.
How can we do this with social sustainability for locals?
Well, I think that one of the things that we're really struggling with in our enabling water smart communities is you're talking about communities that may not even be there at this present time. So when you're talking about community-led development, that's really interesting to do. You've got the community that are going to be occupying it going forward, and they can really feed into it. I think it's realizing that actually, truth be told, you and I possibly don't know what everyone else wants, and making sure that we actually are open to that and understanding a bit better what people want and getting various different voices in there. And I'd say one of the hardest things that we've done is by opening up to so many different sectors. And the biggest thing is the language element. And I'm not talking about kind of speaking different languages. It's actually, what does the word stewardship mean It means different things to different people. What does the word assets mean? And I think as a now working in a water company, it's just so rife with acronyms, and we just assume that everyone understands what what an AMP is, and what WINEP is, and all these different acronyms, and yet actually we need to start talking the same language as everyone else, and looking. We can't do this alone, and ultimately we have to work in partnership. So yeah, I'm not sure I've answered that particularly well. Apologies, Emily.
That's all right. We've got probably time for a few more. So which nature-based solutions do you believe are the most important when thinking about integrated water management?
Oh, that's a good one. I love a rain garden. So I think ultimately, the likes of constructive wetlands are going to be key to this, in terms of their ability to provide that polishing element of what otherwise might be considered to be wastewater, to be for reuse, and also provide that. But you can design it with flood risk, biodiversity, and water quality in mind. I appreciate that's tricky to do it for all three, but it can be done. And I think they play a really valuable role. And there's some great guidance that London Borough of Enfield created a few years back with ZSL and others, which is well worth checking out in terms of how to design constructive wetlands for those different means. I'm going to go with constructive wetlands. There you go. Let's go with that.
Perfect. It's great to see the way that Anglian Water rises to the challenge in a collaborative, shared way, and rethinking the framework and roles. What inspired the values of smart communities, and did donut economics? Oh, it's moved around. Sorry. Donut economics. Where did it go? It's moved.
We'll just stop at the point. No, I thought we could just stop at the exact point where it was just all praise. Did donut economics influence it? I don't know. I'd say.
I want to know what donut economics is. Maybe that shows my lack of knowledge.
Yours and mine both. It'd be impossible for me to answer that entirely. I think ultimately the reason why we've gone down this route is it goes back to our purpose, quite frankly, and we genuinely do believe that we are so fortunate to be able to serve the region in which we operate in, and without the environment and that community working closely with them, we're nothing really. So we have to make sure that we're working with them for the future of this region, and that for me includes that housing development. And quite frankly, although it's focused in on housing, it's also the non-household elements, because you can't just deliver housing without jobs. So it just aligns so perfectly with what our vision is for a company. And apologies for my lack of economic understanding. There's some bright people on this call, isn't there? Jeez.
There are. Okay, I'm going to use Chair's prerogative to ask the final question. Apologies, I haven't got to everyone's questions. There are some quite wordy questions, which I apologise for avoiding, but I'm not great at reading lots of things out on screen. So we will get back to those people that have asked questions and we've not managed to answer today. But if you had the Planet Possible wand, what would you change?
Oh, the Planet Possible wand. There you go. That's a nice plug for the podcast. What would I change? I think I'd like for all organisations to start looking at water in a more holistic fashion. I think there's a number of key stakeholders that are all involved in water, but invariably, because of the scale of us and the need to focus in on a certain, whether that be for flood risk or whether that be for water resources or water quality in rivers or ecological benefit, I think as organisations, we need to start zooming out and going, right, this is all the same water. It can't be everywhere. We haven't got enough of it to go everywhere. So how do we divvy it up in the right way and for the best, most sustainable solution? Because otherwise, everyone else is just protecting their little area. And until we do that, actually, we're just going to be fighting one another constantly. So, we're trying to do that in Anglian. We're trying to actually zoom out and go, it's not just water resources, not just wastewater, it's not just environmental. We've got to look at it in one. And I'd hope that all stakeholders start to do that, which is probably a large wave of the wand. but I appreciate giving them the one. Can I hold on to it for a little bit longer, actually?
Yeah, go for it. Thank you, George, so much, not just for answering those questions, but for the whole presentation. It's been absolutely amazing. I really enjoyed it. I hope everyone else did too. We've gone over 1 o'clock, so apologies for everyone for slightly going over. We are starting to lose numbers quite quickly. So Barbara, can I just pass over to you for any final closing remarks?
I'd just like to thank everybody at the East Anglian branch, and also for George and Rob for answering all the questions and the really fantastic presentation. And I hope that everybody enjoyed the event. And we hope to see you again. And in terms, if you want to hear a bit more about Staines Hall, I believe the last episode of Planet Possible, there is a little bit about from what the work that they're doing. So do tune in. But thank you very much.
Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.